Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, July 20th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. The Minnesota game is in 44 days and the game is in 131 days. And as I've been saying, the Big Ten media days are in 2 days. So we are very, very close to football here. I am Marc Givler. Tom Orr, I thought he was going to come back at some point. I don't know. He might not. He may, he may just be staying in Monte Carlo indefinitely. So we'll see. We'll see if he's back at some point this week. I don't know. No promises. I am joined by Alex Gleitman. We're going to talk a little bit of 2023 recruiting here. First of all, Alex, no commits yet in 2023. How, should we all be panicking?
No. Some years it starts slow. Some years it goes really, really fast. I think once they get rolling, it's going to roll. But no concern. I think a lot of the kids in that class, they're taking advantage of the opportunity to be able to visit schools, which 2 cycles before them didn't really have the chance to do. And they're kind of doing that alongside the 2022 guys who didn't get a chance to do that last year. So I think a lot of these kids are just soaking it all in right now, taking their visits, going to camps, working out with coaches, seeing who they like, probably narrow down their list. Maybe you'll get some commitments in July, August, maybe. But I think you'll see a lot of commitments start to come in following, I guess, what will be their junior seasons. So January through April of next year, I think it's going to be pretty crazy when it comes to 2023 commits, especially for Ohio State.
Yeah, there was no opportunity for them to get any sort of base level knowledge of the schools that are recruiting them.
Yep.
The coaches can't contact them yet. That'll change here a little more than a month. No real visits were allowed to be made. So a lot of these guys in June were making the first visits they had ever made of the recruiting process. So kind of a slow start to the cycle for most teams. I know Oklahoma just had a really nice weekend. They're off to a great start, but I think a lot of teams are going to be seeing things pick up into the winter. Coming off of, a monster 21 class, what looks to be another elite recruiting class in 22. It's hard. We talked about this before we started recording here. It's hard to find these panic areas of need in 2023. But, is there anything off the top of your head that hey, they really have to address this in 23 or, things that are going to be important here as they move forward?
I almost hesitate to say this just because of the polarizing takes on our board, but I think the offensive line is definitely a big area that they have to focus on. I mean, for me, that's something every year that you got to protect that quarterback, whether it's Quinn Ewers, Kyle McCord, CJ Stroud, Jack Miller, whoever it is, you got to protect that golden arm behind center. So, and you got to run the ball if you're Ohio State, certainly. So I think offensive line is always going to be important. But I think when you think about losing some of the veteran guys that they have, even the guys like the Matt Joneses and the Harry Millers that you feel like they're young guys right now that have a few years left. When you think about 2023 and by the time they're ready to really contribute and play at a high level, those guys are all going to be gone. And I think Paris Johnson's probably a 3-and-out guy. And then you look at the 2020 class, and outside of Paris Johnson, there's a lot of question marks. I mean, there's a lot of guys with high ceilings potentially, but there's also guys with a lot of low floors. And so while I do think that there were, they did a good job in 2021, and I think they're starting to put together a nice 2022 class on the offensive line, I think there's still a lot of question marks for that room. And so for me, that's a big area, I think, on the offensive side of the ball that I'm really looking at. I think on the defensive side of the ball, and you and I know both agree on this one, I think linebacker is a huge need. Similar to the offensive line, a lot of veteran guys that are going to move on. And then even guys like Cody Simon, Tommy Eichenberg, entering their second years. Those, after that, there's a lot of question marks. We don't really know how the pieces are going to fall. And, is Jalen Johnson, is he a linebacker? Can he play at this level? I mean, is Court Williams, is he eventually a linebacker? How does Craig? So there's just so many pieces, and how do they fit into the puzzle that for me, I think that on the defensive side of the ball, probably linebacker. And then I still think defensive end, I still think they need to load up that position. I know they just obviously got Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. I would still argue that there's questions about does JT stay on the outside, and Jack Sawyer's probably a three and done type of guy. I think both of them probably would like to be 3 and done type of guys. So I think you look at that position, they don't have any committed for 2022 right now. So defensive end, linebacker, and offensive line are my 3 spots where I think Ohio State really has to focus in 2023.
Yeah, it's such a veteran group on the offensive line. Like even you mentioned, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not just that, Nick Petit's going to be gone or Harry Miller, Matthew Jones probably gone, was going to be gone at that point. DeJuan Jones is probably gone at that point. Paris Johnson, probably a 3 and out guy. So there's going to be this void left, I think, here after, in the next year or two, where you're going to have to hope that you've hit on a high percentage of your targets. And if you haven't, then it's going to really put an importance on 23. But my philosophy is you need like 4 good ones every year on the offensive line. So that's always going to be a thing. And the way they rotate those defensive ends, you need a couple pass rushers every year. And it's the way, not only the way you rotate them, but the way you send them to the league in 3 years all the time is that really, it's one thing when you're, on the offensive line, when you're developing guys over 4 or 5 years and then you're losing them. But when you're turning these 3 and dones like they are right now, that just makes it so much harder to reload. So they got to do that again. I think linebacker is the big one for me. I think everyone looks at this year's linebacking core as they almost look at it as young, but it's not going to be young. It's just going to be inexperienced. They have a lot of veteran linebackers on the team. They don't have a lot of young known commodities. So, and it looks like they may not even, I think they're going to look for sure. And I would be a little surprised if they didn't end up taking another linebacker in 22, but it's possible they don't. I mean, that is possible. I think it's more likely that they find somebody between now and signing day, but I think they probably need to hammer linebacker in 23. So one of the interesting things for me in 23 is the quarterback situation. I don't know how you're going to convince one of the elite guys, and I've kind of been saying this for a few months now, so I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but it's just like the way they've done things the last few years, a quarterback is zero in on like 2 or 3 guys, and then the first one you can get, you kind of take. I don't think they're not going to be able to do that here in 23. They're going to have to really spread this thing out. I think they're going to have to offer maybe a dozen guys or more when it's all said and done. And then I think you're going to have to find a developmental guy, or I think the dream scenario is a CJ Stroud situation arises where you get in on a kid between his junior and senior years that just kind of blows up and turns into a national prospect. But that's going to be the challenge. I mean, how do you see quarterback recruiting shaking out? Before I throw it over to you, I think they would love Drew Aller to be a 2023. I think that would have been, they got to find a Drew Aller, I think, but I'm just kind of curious how you see that playing out.
Yeah. See, I see it twofold because I actually think the sell isn't as hard as it's perceived to be. So if you're selling this quarterback, right? Well, you have Quinn Ewers in front of you. And I think that's what people are worried about. Forget Kyle McCord and potentially CJ Stroud, but I think you got to focus on Quinn Ewers because you would think that those guys are probably gone by the time you're ready to really make an impact. And I think, you're almost saying, I would say to a kid, if I was recruiting them in 2023, Quinn's going to be a sophomore when you're a freshman. You sit behind him, you learn, you redshirt, you save a year, maybe. You don't have to, we'll use you as needed, but you can even still play in 4 games and still preserve a red shirt. And then he's 3 and gone. So when you're a sophomore, yeah, he's a junior, but then he's gone and you're either a redshirt sophomore you're either going to be a junior, a true junior, or redshirt sophomore with 2 or 3 years to be the starting quarterback at Ohio State. And I know kids are all about like now. Yeah. And they're focused. I want to get on the field now. And I think that perception problem, having Quinn Ewers in front of you and realizing you're not going to get on the field as a freshman, as a sophomore, which quite honestly, I think any quarterback who comes in and assumes they're going to be a starter as a freshman, I mean, that's very rare. And there are situations you could go to a smaller school. You could be Sam Howell and go to North Carolina over some big power and potentially start there. Right. I mean, I think there's every now and then there's opportunities even at Ohio State for that to potentially happen. Look at Terrell Pryor, obviously a decade plus ago. But I just think the sell isn't really as hard as the perception of it is. Now, getting kids to realize that they can wait 2 years, learn under Quinn Ewers, develop with Ryan Day, and then become a starting quarterback, Heisman candidate, All-American, potential high draft pick at Ohio State. I think that's going to be more of the challenge. And so I agree with you. It's you already saw what they did in camp, what they offer, like 3-4 guys already in that class outside of, everyone else who they've already offered. And they had a few others who they kind of said, let's watch the film. We want to see a little bit more. So I think that they're going to be really smart. They're not obviously going to reach for anyone, but they're going to have to be patient. I 1,000% agree with that. And I think the actual sell is not as hard as as defeating the perception of the situation.
Yeah, I think you did hit the right way to sell it as far as with Ewers. So there's really no scenario that I say this with the risk of putting my foot in my mouth, but there's really no scenario to me that sounds reasonable that Quinn Ewers is at Ohio State more than 3 years. Whether that's him fulfilling his ranking and being the guy and being this elite quarterback, or whether that's him not fulfilling his ranking, Kyle McCord beats him out in a quarterback competition in a couple of years, and Quinn Ewers, goes elsewhere at that point, possibly. I just don't think Quinn Ewers is a 4 or 5 year player at Ohio State. So that's going to have to be the selling point. But you're going to have to really, yeah.
I was just going to say scenario 2 of Kyle McCord beating him out and Quinn leaving, that's even better for a 2023 quarterback. So, either way, it's not a bad situation to walk into.
No, it's not. I just know how the game is played. Oh gosh.
You know how these kids think too. And
how they think, and just now you got NIL thrown in there too. And so you're going to want to go somewhere where you can be the starting quarterbacks. You can kind of cash in on NIL. I'm already hearing that from like parents, and it's like scaring me to death. But you're already like hearing that of like, yeah, you gotta get on the field. Cause then, if you're, no one wants to pay the third string quarterback or the third string linebacker. You got to be out there making plays to get the NIL. And it's like, here we go with that. So it's not a complicated thought process in terms of the sale, but it's finding the right kid and family that's going to actually buy in and kind of see it that way is going to be, I think, the challenge. But, we'll see how that goes. One thing I would throw out, and I don't look at it as like a desperation situation at all. But I do think, and we just saw Trayon Webb commit to Oklahoma here over the weekend. I think they got to come out of this class with a stud running back. They're going to lose some of this depth by the time 2023 gets there. I really like Dallin Hayden, and I think he's a really good player, certainly a starting caliber running back at Ohio State. Is he Travion Henderson or Dobbins or Elliott? I'm just not sure about that at this point. So either way, you're going to want something to pair with him long-term. And so you're in on these guys, Richard Young and Reuben Owens and just all these other guys that are out there. And I think that's going to be, as we get back to kind of the keys of the class, I think, Tony Alford coming up with not just a running back, but, a star running back. And it's got a real good chance of being a 2-back class, to be honest, but just making sure one of those is kind of that difference maker, because it looks like Travion Henderson could be a potential 3-and-out guy. I mean, I'm sure that's certainly in the plans for him. We'll see if that materializes. Obviously the early reviews are good there. But with the running backs, I just think, they're going to have to come out with one there. And then we see if they can add a second one to that group. But, how are you feeling, I guess, about the running back room right now in regards to 23 and kind of what the philosophy needs to be there?
Yeah, I definitely think they need one elite guy. I mean, Trayon Webb committed to Oklahoma, and I'm not really sure he's going to be in play, but you never know. This was already his second commitment early on. So you keep the contact as long as he'll talk to you. And I know he likes Tony Alford, and I think Ohio State finished a fairly close second, but Richard Young is obviously the guy. I mean, Reuben Owens, there's a couple other guys in that mix that, probably like a handful of guys that I think are in that, like, it's a great running back class. There's a handful of elite guys, and I think Ohio State will continue to chase them. And then I think, to your point, they need to add at least one of those guys, because this is almost the opposite of quarterback to some extent, where while I agree, Dallin Hayden could surprise a lot of people and be he could be an all Big Ten running back. I wouldn't be surprised. And Evan Pryor could be too. And I think he's going to redshirt this year, and that puts him in the same class as Dallin Hayden, basically. So if you had a running back room of Dallin Hayden and Evan Pryor, I mean, that's a pretty good room. But when the perception is that, look at the rank, these kids look at rankings and things like that. And they look at Dallin Hayden and they look at him as a kid that they can beat out. And I think they look at Trevion Henderson, they look at him as a kid who's probably 3 and out based on not only his ranking, but all the hype he's getting so far as well, from the spring and throughout the summer. And so I think that, if you're 2023 back, elite kid, you feel like you could step into that room right away. And if nothing else, be a part of that running back rotation and make an immediate impact, and then take the job year 2 and 3 and then go to the NFL. But I think there actually is a realistic chance to take that job in year 1 if you are good enough. And I think a guy like Richard Young, as good as J.K. Dobbins was in high school and was as a freshman, I would say right now I would feel that Richard Young is a better prospect than J.K. Dobbins. And J.K. Dobbins started as a freshman at Ohio State. So that's my take on it. I think I agree with you. I think a 2-back class makes a lot of sense, because there's guys like Steel Chambers already moved to linebacker. Marcus Crowley will not be there by the time a 2023 running back comes in. I mean, Mayan Williams might be gone by then. Who knows? If not, he'll be a senior, right? So I think that and to your point, if Trevion Henderson leaves, that really leaves you with Evan Pryor and Dallin Hayden. And those guys will be kind of upperclassmen veterans to some extent at that point. So I think that they do need 2. And if they could get 2 of those elite guys, amazing. But if they could get, a Richard Young type of guy, and then maybe they find someone else later who's just a good solid back, maybe a Dallin Hayden to go with a Richard Young. I mean, I think that that's what they need.
Yeah. And I think they're well positioned to handle that. I keep saying, I know it's kind of feels like I'm maybe talking out both sides of my mouth here, but it's like, I think they're in a great position with Richard Young right now, but there is no chance Richard Young is committing anywhere in the next probably 6 to 8 months. We are looking probably spring at the earliest, and I don't even know if it'll be that early. So in the meantime, they're going to have to continue to work guys. When you're talking about a 2-back class, you don't have any, obviously, at this point. And then you got one who you're going to fight for till the very end, but it's going to be a process there. They're going to have to kind of, I think, broaden the search here at some point. But I'm fascinated to see this Reuben Owens visit upcoming, because I think there's some pretty serious interest there. And that'll be interesting to kind of see if they get any traction on this July visit with Reuben Owens and kind of what the buzz is coming out of that visit. That'll be interesting to me. But there's some homework I think that needs to be done there to make sure that they get 2 in this class. So in terms of broadening the scope a little bit here this fall, I think we'll see some new running back targets emerge, even if they don't end up having to go to those guys, just if nothing else to keep the insurance, because again, you're talking about battling for 5-star running backs from Florida and Texas. Those aren't going to be slam dunks. So going to be fascinating. I think that's going to be a big part of the class, and then kind of the last thing I want to say, as we wrap this up here, talk about the defensive back situation is, look, they signed a huge defensive back class in 21. They're going to sign another huge defensive back class in 22. We talked about this in the class recap we did, I think, a couple weeks ago, where the number right now, they've got 5 defensive backs committed. It's probably going to be at least 6 by the time the dust settles. We don't know who those 6 are going to be, blah, blah, blah. We'll, fast forward through all that, but you're talking about basically taking like a dozen defensive backs in 2 years. So they're going to be hyper selective now, I think, at defensive back. AJ Harris is very likely going to decide September-ish. I mean, at the latest, maybe October at the very latest. And I think Ohio State leads for AJ Harris. I don't want to say shocked, but I would be mildly surprised if Ohio State did not get AJ Harris at this point. And if they do, now you're being hyper selective. So we kind of talk about what the needs are, but what's that going to be like for Kerry Combs? Even, take Harris maybe out of the picture for a minute. What's that going to be like for Kerry Combs, for, basically one of the Ohio State's best recruiters, to have 18 months to kind of be like, let me pick like the 2 or 3 guys in the entire country that I want. I mean, that's going to be a huge advantage, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about, especially that guy, the way he recruits. And I mean, I remember even last year they had to turn away a bunch of guys, and this year they're going to have to turn away some guys who wanted. And I mean, we don't know how the dust is going to fully settle, but there's a guy like Ephesians Prysock who they brought in from California. And I think if they wanted him, they could have got him. They brought him in for an official visit, and he's a highly ranked kid, a top 250, 4-star type of kid that you would take, that pretty much 99% of programs would take, and Ohio State would take maybe in a lot of years too. But that's just how good their defensive back recruiting has been going since Kerry Combs returned to Ohio State. And I think, to your point, that's just giving him basically the ability to zone in on just who can I get the 3 best, and not have to worry about filling 6, 7, maybe 8 spots like they're going to do this year. I just think that you're going to get the cream of the crop, and AJ Harris would certainly fill that billing. And there's probably a couple other guys. I don't know if you're going to consider Sonny Styles a defensive back. I would maybe just consider him in his own category at this point, but there's going to be some really, really good players out there that Ohio State has to turn away. And that means that the ones that they're going to get are going to be elite type talents. And
I think you hit on a good one there with Sonny. We just talked about how important linebacker was going to be. I think that's where Sonny's going to be. In fact, we're talking about, there's a lot of linebacker safety hybrid talk with him. I think it's actually linebacker edge hybrid when I see him, when I see how big he has gotten and what's left there. For example, I mean, he's a bigger bodied kid than even a Jonathan Cooper was. I mean, he is going to play. I don't know how he's not going to play at 245, 250. I really don't. And so I think he's kind of one of those freak linebacker DN almost, front 7 more than a back 7, I guess would be my thing. But how important, I mean, God, we talked about Zach Harrison like this, I guess, a little bit. I think Sonny's a better prospect than Zach Harrison. He's certainly a better football player than Zach Harrison was at this point in his career. Jack Sawyer committed early, so we never had to talk about how important he was. And then Paris Johnson committed early. Obviously, there was some drama there for a few months, but they got him back in full. But is this as important of a in-state get as they've had in a while? I mean, I feel like it is, but am I being a prisoner of the moment right now?
I don't think so. And Jack, I think, would fall into that category if he wasn't just like a Buckeye lock and all that stuff because of the position and who his caliber of recruit. But I mean, I would almost put Luke Montgomery up in that category too, just because of his position on the offensive line. And I think, right now people have him as maybe like a top 75 kid. I think he might end up as a top 25 kid by the time we look back at these rankings and say, how was he ranked so low? Almost like a Joey Bosa type, where he was ranked pretty high in general, like in the 30s and 40s, but he should have been ranked in the top 10. And so I think Sonny Styles, I mean, I was trying to think back in my head of in-state kids and who is as important. And I mean, there's guys who you tag, like Jackson Carman, people tagged with that. And you look back and you're like, yeah, he was obviously really good, high NFL draft pick, national title player at Clemson and all that stuff. But when you look back, I don't think you're really like, oh man, that was a huge miss. Yes, it stung because it would have been great to have him, but I don't think you look back. I think Sonny Styles is the type of guy where you look back and you're like, man, he is just so good. Because I agree. I don't know where he's going to end up. Maybe he's Isaiah Simmons and he could just do everything. That could be possible. Him and CJ Hicks. I don't know, but I think he is that type of talent. It's really crazy. And I think with Brennan Vernon going to Notre Dame already, and that one's, I don't think is going to change unless there's a coaching change in South Bend. But I just think that Sonny Styles, that made Sonny Styles that much more important. And I think it also makes Luke Montgomery that much more important.
Yeah, they're definitely, I think with Luke, it's, the premium position, a tackle. Watching him at camp was really impressive because he's not a guy who's done a lot of that stuff before. And just the way he was I kind of compared him to like a someone who was like guarding the perimeter in basketball, just the way he was able to move his feet and stay in front of guys, even if it wasn't always perfect technically, just the raw athleticism to just stay in front of some really, really elite defensive linemen was really eye-opening for me. Just getting a chance to kind of watch him do that. And then I was driving the Jack Sawyer bus very early. I've been on record for a long time now. I think he's the best player to come out of Ohio in a decade, maybe more. And I don't want to say Sonny's better. I'm not going to say Sonny's better, but Sonny is unique. It's just a really interesting skill set. I know CJ Hicks has a similar skill set. I've seen where CJ's body has gone though the last year or so. And I don't know that CJ could play like a deep free safety at like the highest levels of Ohio high school football, and that would be like a great fit for him. Even saying that, so like Sonny can, and that's kind of what he does at Pick Central. And that'll probably change this year. I think we're going to see him moving around a lot more this year. Spoiler alert, but there's something about his game that is just truly unique. And it's not that he's better than Paris Johnson or better than Jack Sawyer. I'm not saying that, but he's just a weapon. He's a defensive weapon. And I don't know that I've seen someone recently in high school that I could put as a deep free safety to do a cover one free safety. He could play anywhere, any of the linebacker positions. And I think if he put his hand in the dirt, he'd probably be the best defensive end in Ohio. So it just, when you need those things on your defense too, like you need linebackers, it makes it very interesting for me. And the fact that, Notre Dame is going to be a factor here. I do like where Ohio State's at early. I do think he's a little bit different than his brother. I think kind of different personalities, but he's not that early lock and lead the class guy that, Jack Sawyer and CJ Hicks were, and that Paris Johnson was until, the Urban Meyer retirement. But so that's going to lead for, I think for some extra anxiety, and, it's going to be interesting to follow. And that's going to be, I think he's one of the most important in-state guys they've had in a while. So any parting thoughts here on 23? I know we covered probably more ground than we thought we'd cover. So, yeah. I guess, I'll wrap it up with this. First commit in 2023. Any, favorites on that? I think it might be Josh Padilla, but I'm also thought that might have happened by now. So now I'm not so sure.
He is coming for the barbecue
in
next week or whenever that is. Go. Yeah. Next Thursday. So maybe it happens then.
Betting favorite, you think?
I think he's gotta be, but if not, it might be AJ Harris. It might be. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anyone in state that's really presented themselves. I mean, if they're willing to take Derek LeBlanc, I mean, he's making his third trip to Columbus on his own dime from Florida this summer. I mean, that could be a candidate right there. Yep. And he told me he not necessarily to Ohio State, but that he can make his commitment at any time. There's no set time, whenever he feels comfortable. And I know he loves it up at Ohio State. We got to dig into, are they going to be willing to take him? If he comes up to this bar, he's coming to the barbecue. Is he going to come to the barbecue? And if he wants to commit, are they going to be willing to take him? And I got to get the answer to that question, because he would be a dark horse candidate for me to some extent.
An early Florida commitment. What could possibly go wrong there? I shouldn't say that. Derek has presented himself as very sincere about Ohio State. I think he's a little bit, I think, different than maybe what people have been used to in Florida. I'm not saying he's going to be shaky if he commits early, but it is just funny. We've got a history of these early Florida steals, and then they either they either don't stick or it's still the next 18 months. It's just like they might as well be uncommitted, as we're seeing right now with Jaheim Singletary. So I think Derek's probably he seems like a pretty low key kid from my interactions there. So that would not be a bad start at all. I think any of those three would be a good start. So that we kind of ran through there, but we'll see how it goes. I'm sure we'll be talking about the barbecue and more recruiting coverage here on the site here the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. We've got Nevada Buck dropping summer nuggets on the board. We've got Big Ten Media Days coming up. We've got recruiting firing back up here at the end of July, and then high school football is going to be upon us and college football is going to be upon us. So now's a great time to sign up at buckeyescoop.com. You can get all of our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice, or you can do the video cast on youtube.com/buckeyescoop. But until then, we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.